All right, ready to dig in. We're tackling Grit today, Angela Duckworth's book. Really diving into what makes people successful. I was going through the excerpts you sent over, and it's really got me thinking about this whole idea of talent versus hard work.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic for sure. And Duckworth, she really challenges that old idea that we're all born with a fixed amount of talent.
Right, like we're either destined for greatness or stuck in mediocrity, like Mozart or nothing, right?
Exactly. And what I find really interesting is how Duckworth uses her own experiences to kind of like set the stage.
Oh, yeah, she talks about that, doesn't she? About how she started out as a teacher.
Yeah, and even her dad, her own father, constantly told her she wasn't a genius.
Oh, wow. I can only imagine what those conversations were like. You're not a genius, but
Right. But it's like, it kind of makes you wonder, do we use this idea of talent as a way to kind of let ourselves off the hook?
that's interesting. So if someone else is naturally brilliant, it means we don't have to push ourselves as hard.
Yeah, maybe. Like, we're not all cut out to be Einstein, so why bother? But Duckworth's research at West Point kind of flips that on its head.
West Point, You'd think at a place like that with all those high achievers, everyone would just like sail through.
You think so, right? But she found that even there, even with all that talent, some people still struggled, especially during that brutal beast barracks training.
So it wasn't just about raw talent, there was something else going on.
Exactly. She started studying like everyone from spelling bee champs to musicians, you name it, and the pattern was the same. The most successful people weren't always the most naturally gifted.
So what set them apart? What did they have that the others didn't?
That's where grit comes in. These high achievers, they had this incredible drive, this perseverance. They just didn't give up.
Okay, so grit, it's about more than just, not quitting. But how does that actually work if you're not naturally talented in a specific area? Can you really just like outwork someone who's just naturally gifted?
Well, Duckworth argues that effort, it's not just about trying harder. She actually says effort counts twice.
Effort counts twice. What does that even mean?
So it's not just about having talent, it's what you do with it. It's like effort amplifies your talent, helps you turn it into actual skill. But then, here's the kicker. Effort is also what takes that skill and turns it into achievement, into real-world success.
So someone with like average talent but a ton of grit could actually outperform someone who's naturally gifted but lazy.
Exactly. And she has this great example in the book about McKinsey and Company, the big consulting firm.
Yeah, they're all about recruiting the best and brightest.
Right. They even wrote that whole report, The War for Talent, basically saying companies should focus all their energy on finding those superstars. But get this.
What happened? Did it work?
Not so much, actually. This journalist, Duff McDonald, he looked into it, and it turns out the companies that McKinsey praised for being so talent-centric, they didn't actually perform that well.
Really? You'd think focusing on talent would be a surefire recipe for success.
You would, wouldn't you? But it seems like being so focused on talent might have actually blinded them to other important factors.
It's like they were so busy searching for the next Einstein, they forgot that even Einstein had to put in the work.
Exactly. And what's really interesting? She contrasts this with Enron, the energy company that went bankrupt because
Yeah.
of all that fraud.
Oh, right. Didn't they have that whole brutal performance review system, like weeding out anyone who didn't make the cut?
Yep. They were obsessed with talent, but in a really ruthless way. And their downfall, it shows how a singular focus on talent, without considering things like, ethics, teamwork, and yeah, even grit, can be a recipe for disaster.
So it's not just about talent or grit, it's about finding that balance.
Right. And that's where things get really interesting because now we start to unpack what grit really is and how we can actually cultivate it in our own lives. So when we talk about grit, it's not just about like being stubborn, right? It's not just about refusing to give up even when things get tough.
Okay, so there's more to it than just putting your head down and powering through no matter what.
Exactly. It's about having this like deep-seated passion for a long-term goal, something that truly fuels your efforts day after day, even when it's hard.
So it's about having that fire in your belly, that
Yeah.
drive that keeps you going when others might, throw in the towel.
Yes. And to illustrate this, Duckworth talks about this idea of a goal hierarchy, where gritty people have this like really clear picture of their ultimate goal, their
Yeah.
purpose, and all their other goals, all the things they do, they all feed into that bigger ambition.
So it's like having a roadmap. Right.
Yeah.
You know where you want to go, your ultimate destination. And even if there are detours or roadblocks along the way, you just keep adjusting your route, figuring out how to get there.
Exactly. And, she gives some great examples of this in the book. Like, she talks about Tom Seaver.
Oh, wow, the baseball pitcher.
Mm.
Tom Mister. Terrific. I remember my dad used to talk about him. Wasn't he known for his incredible work ethic?
Exactly.
Mm.
I mean, his ultimate goal was to be the best pitcher he could possibly be. And everything he did, everything from his training regimen to, like, studying opposing batters, it was all geared towards that. But here's the thing. He wasn't just about, brute strength and endless practice. He was strategic about it.
He put a lot of thought into it, for sure.
Exactly. He was always refining his technique, learning from his mistakes, always adapting. And you know what? This reminds me of another example from the book, someone you might not expect, Jeff Bezos.
Wait, the Amazon guy? What does starting a business have to do with, like, grit? They seem pretty different.
You're right, it doesn't seem obvious at first. But think about it. Bezos had this vision of creating this company that could, like, deliver practically anything to people all over the world, right?
Yeah.
And back then, remember, people thought he was crazy for starting with just books.
Right. Like, who's going to buy books online?
Exactly. But he stuck with it. He had that vision. And even when people were skeptical, when he faced setbacks, he never wavered. Look at Amazon now.
It's crazy how much it's grown. It really shows the power of sticking to your guns, believing in your vision.
Right. And that actually brings us to another super important element of grit: deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice. So isn't all practice, like, deliberate? If you're putting in the time, isn't that enough?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it's not that simple. Duckworth explains that deliberate practice, it's not just about repeating the same thing over and over again. It's about pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone, really focusing on those specific areas you need to improve, and then getting immediate feedback.
So it's not just going through the motions, right? It's about being really intentional, strategic with your practice.
Exactly. Like if you were learning a new language, right?
Yeah.
With deliberate practice, you wouldn't just passively listen to language tapes, hoping something sticks.
You'd be, like, actively practicing, really.
Exactly. You'd be actively practicing, speaking,
Mhm.
focusing on grammar rules, maybe even recording yourself to, like, pinpoint those areas where you need to improve.
That makes a lot of sense. And it sounds kind of intense, to be honest.
It can be.
Yeah.
And to really drive this point home, Duckworth talks about this guy, Noah Kageyama.
Okay. Who's that?
So he's a performance psychologist at Juilliard, the music school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and he's also a musician himself. And get this, he didn't actually start deliberate practice until he was 22 years old.
22. That's, like, really late to be upping your game like that. Did something happen?
Well, once he learned about deliberate practice, once he started actually applying it, he made more progress in a shorter amount of time than he ever thought possible. It's like he unlocked this secret level of skill development.
Wow. That just goes to show you it's never too late to improve.
Exactly. And, this actually leads to another really interesting idea that's kind of tied to deliberate practice, the concept of flow.
Oh, I've heard of that. It's like that feeling of being totally in the zone, right? Where you're so engrossed in what you're doing that time just seems to disappear.
That's it.
Yeah.
But, it makes you wonder, if deliberate practice is all about pushing yourself, is it always enjoyable? It sounds kind of intense.
Yeah, for sure.
It can be.
Yeah.
And Duckworth, she actually acknowledges that. Yeah, flow can be this amazing, rewarding feeling, but deliberate practice.
Hmm.
It often involves pushing past discomfort. It can be frustrating, sometimes even, straight up painful.
It's like the saying, no pain, no gain, right? But is there a difference between just, like, suffering through something and pushing yourself with a purpose?
Exactly. That's the key difference. And that's what separates grit from just, enduring something you hate. Grit means being passionate about the process, about the journey, not just the end goal.
So you're saying gritty people, even when they're pushing themselves hard, they're finding a way to, like, actually enjoy the challenge?
That sounds kind of crazy, right? But that's what Duckworth found. She talks about these spelling bee champs, and the grittier ones, they not only practiced more, but they actually enjoyed the process of deliberate practice more than their less gritty counterparts.
Interesting. So it's not about never feeling discomfort or frustration. It's about how you view those experiences. Gritty people, they see those challenges as part of something bigger, something more meaningful. So we've talked about, how grit is more than just raw talent. It's about effort, deliberate practice, having that drive to keep going even when things get tough. But I gotta ask, how do you even find something you're passionate enough about? to put in that kind of effort?
$1 million question. Right. It's like
Yes.
everyone's looking for that one true calling, that find your passion myth.
Right, like it's just going to hit you out of the blue.
Exactly. But Duckworth, she says, no, our passions, we don't just find them fully formed. It's more about exploration.
So it's less about waiting for a sign and more about like actively trying things out, seeing what sticks.
Exactly. Be willing to experiment, even if you're not sure. Remember how we were talking about Jeff Bezos?
Yeah, he didn't start Amazon knowing for sure it'd be huge.
Right. He had that philosophy degree, tried different things, even photography. Those experiences shaped him.
It shows you can't be afraid to try stuff. Your passions can totally change.
Absolutely. Duckworth even talks about, like, Olympic swimmer Rowdy Gaines.
Didn't he try a bunch of other sports first?
He did. Football, baseball, you name it. Found his calling almost by accident when he tried swimming. And look at him now.
Amazing. Okay, so say you have found something, dabbled around. How do you develop the grit to stick with it when it gets hard?
Mindset. This is where it gets really interesting. Duckworth talks about Carol Dweck's work, growth mindset versus fixed mindset.
Oh, yeah, believing you can improve versus thinking you're stuck as you are.
Exactly. And a growth mindset, that's essential for grit. When you hit a wall and think, I'm not good enough, that's fixed mindset. But, okay, this is tough, but I can learn. That's growth.
It's like that Michael Jordan quote, failing over and over is how you succeed.
Exactly. And it even applies to how we talk to kids. Instead of, you're so smart, it's, wow, you worked hard, it shows.
So it's about praising the process, the effort, not just the outcome.
Right. And she gives the example of KPP schools. They're doing awesome work with this, fostering growth mindsets.
Creating that space where it's okay to make mistakes, to not be perfect right away as long as you learn.
Yes. And that ties into hope. When you have a growth mindset, you start to see setbacks not as failures, but as learning experiences.
Believing you can overcome challenges even when they're really hard.
And supportive relationships are huge GE for this. Parents, mentors, coaches, they all play a role.
Building that network of support where you feel safe to take risks, knowing people have your back.
And here's something wild. Even those who seem naturally gifted, sometimes they need help learning to deal with setbacks.
Because if you've never really failed, that first big one can be crushing. You don't have the experience to know it's okay.
Exactly. So learning how to bounce back, that's key for grit. And then it's not just about individual grit either, right?
They're talking about the whole culture around you.
Yeah. Right. Like surrounding yourself with other driven people. It can make a huge difference. Duckworth talks about Anson Dorrance, the UNC women's soccer coach. Oh, wow. They've won, what is it, like a zillion championships, something like that, yeah. 21. And he's known for building this culture of both intense competition, A&D support.
So it's about pushing each other to be better, but also being there for each other.
And he's big on using language to reinforce their team values. Everyone knows what it means to be on that team.
Creating that shared identity.
Exactly. And another great example, Pete Carroll, coach of the Seattle Seahawks. He's got this infectious energy, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it translates to their whole team culture.
Yeah.
He really emphasizes competition, but not in a cutthroat way. More about pushing each other to be their best and then celebrating each other's wins.
So finding that balance between pushing and supporting.
And that's what's so powerful about grit. It's not just about individual achievement. It's about finding a purpose that's bigger than yourself.
Finding that thing you're willing to fight for, to struggle for, not just for yourself, but for something more.
What's your hard thing? What challenge are you willing to embrace, even when it's tough? Because you know it matters.
That's such a great question to think about. And it really gets at the heart of what Duckworth is saying. Grit isn't about being some kind of superhuman. It's about aligning your effort with your values, finding that purpose in the struggle, and using your passion to make a difference. And at the end of the day, isn't that what it's all about?